Good morning, everyone. We are Danilo Álvarez, Jhonn Vera, and Julián Pérez, students from the Bachelor degree in Foreign Languages, English French at the University of Pamplona. Today, we are presenting our final pedagogical project called My Colorful World, a flashcard project for A1 vocabulary development and meaningful language use among primary school learners in Pamplona, Colombia.
Well, the project took place in a primary school in Pamplona, as Danilo mentioned before, in Pamplona Norte, Santander. It is a school that serves students from neighborhoods where many families face like economical difficulties. Most classrooms have no projector, no textbooks for every student, and no internet access. So from the beginning, we knew that we had to design like something that worked with very limited resources.
Well, we work with students from second, third, fourth, and fifth grade. Each of us was in charge of different group. Danilo worked with second and fifth grade. I worked with third grade, and Jhonn worked with fourth grade. All the students were at an A1 level, but each grade was very different in terms of how independently they could write, draw, or speak in English.
Each grade had 3 English classes per week. We used about 20 to 30 minutes of one session each week for the flashcard project, while the rest of the time continued with regular English lessons on the same vocabulary topic. The two things were connected on purpose. What they practiced in the regular class was the same vocabulary they were putting on their flashcards.
Well, before we designed the project, we spent several days, so we spent a lot of time observing the groups. And that what we noticed was that for most of these students, the English class was the only moment in their day when they used the language. They didn't have English shows at home, no books in English, nothing to practice. So whatever happened in that classroom was basically their only chance to learn and they only chance to practice.
At A1 level, the biggest need was vocabulary. So students weren't reading or writing sentences yet. They were just beginning to build a basic foundation in English. We feel that doing isolated vocabulary list, one per week, and then moving on, was not going to be enough. We needed something that will give students repeated contact with the same words and a reason to keep coming back to them.
Well, so our general objective was to help students develop A1 vocabulary and use English in a meaningful way through a flashcard project. Or specifically, we wanted them to learn vocabulary around 6 topics: colors, family, body parts, animals, feelings, and daily routines. And we also wanted them to practice using those words, not just memorize them. And we wanted the project to produce something real, a set of flashcards they actually made, and that would stay in the classroom after we leave.
Well, the reason we chose flashcard is backed by research, obviously. Studies like Web and Nation from 2017 show that vocabulary sticks better when students will interact with it multiple times in active ways. So, for example, when a student draws a picture and writes the word next to it, they are processing that word visually, physically, and linguistically at the same time. That's much more effective than just copying from a list from the board. And since the school had very few resources, as we mentioned before, flashcards were perfect for us. All we needed was paper, color pencil, and sometimes markers.
Well, about the theoretical foundation, the project was based on three main approaches. The first one is project based learning. The idea is simple. Instead of doing isolated activities, students work toward a final product over several weeks. In our case, that product was their flashcard collection. Each week, they add more cards so they could actually see the project growing. That gave them a clear goal and kept them motivated throughout.
Well, the second approach is the communicative approach. Even though these were beginner students, we didn't want them to just repeat words mechanically. So we designed activities where they had to actually use the language to communicate something. For example, showing a card to a partner and asking them to name it or answering the question. How do you feel today? Those are real communicative moments, even if they are simple.
Yeah, the third one is related to the Krashen's idea of the affective filter. Basically, students learn better when they feel safe and comfortable. That's why we introduce the daily feelings check-in. Not just as a isolated vocabulary practice, but also to set like a relaxed tone and at the start of each class to introduce the class. When students feel okay making mistakes, they participate more. And more participations means obviously more language practice.
Well, according to the implementation, every session had the same basic structure, a warm-up activity, then vocabulary presentation, and then the flashcard production stage. We keep the structure the same every week so students knew what to expect. That made the class run more smoothly, especially with younger groups.
Now, one important aspect or one important change that we made early on was to use printed black and white templates instead of asking students to draw everything from scratch. We have between 20 and 30 minutes for the project part for each class. So with four different grade levels, we quickly realized that free-handed drawing would take too long. So the templates let us focus the time on the vocabulary, coloring, labeling, and practicing the words.
Yeah. Well, talking about the project timeline, in week one, we introduced the project and started with colors. That was the first topic. We began each class by showing students a finished color flashcard so they could see what they were going to make. The students colored their templates and then wrote the name of each color. And younger students traced the words, while older ones wrote there on their own. Yeah.
Well, in week two was about family members and body parts. For body parts, we use a total physical response activity. The teacher said a word and students touched that part of their body. We kept speeding up, which made it really fun and got the whole class moving. In fourth grade, we turned into Simon Says, and the students loved it so much they asked to play again after the warm-up was over.
Well, in the third week, we introduced animals, but we also asked students to use the colors from week one to describe their drawings. So instead of just naming the animals, they had to say things like my dog is black or my cat is orange and white. It was the first time we saw students combining vocabulary from different weeks, and it worked really well.
Yeah, it was. Well, in the week four, we work on feelings and emotions. Well, uh, in this week, we also started the daily feelings check-in. At the beginning of each class, we ask it, "How do you feel today?" And students point the card and say the word. So by week five, some groups were starting the check-in in their own before even we asked. When we entered the class, they said like, "Oh, teacher, I feel happy today." So it was really good.
Well, finally, in week five, we cover daily routines. By that point, students were very comfortable with the routine of the class. Older students were finishing quickly and adding extra details to their cards. And we put all the flashcards from previous weeks on the board so students could see how much vocabulary they had already built up.
Well, now to show the evidence of the implementation of the project, we uh, we collected different types of evidence. photos from the session, samples of the students' flashcards from each week, the lesson plan templates we used, and our own observation notes. And everything is organized in our network portfolio.
Yeah. Looking at the results, well, let me show you first the evidence of the implementation. This is samples of a student's work. And well, these are the flashcards already finished, already colored. And now looking at the results, well, the clearest pattern across all four grades was that the students become like more independent over time. This means that in the first week, students needed a lot of support. The teacher had to model the flashcard multiple times, and the students were constantly asking questions like, which color do I have to use? Is it okay? What do I have to do? But by the end, at the week number 5, most of them were already able to complete their flashcard on their own. Of course, the level of independence was different depending on the grade, but they were much more able to finish by themselves.
Well, second grade students still needed to trace most words by the end, but they participated actively in the warm-ups and in the feeling checking. Third graders moved from single words to short phrases like "my dog is black" by week 3. Fourth grade, students became very engaged. They started initiating the checking routine themselves by the last week, and fifth graders showed the stronger progress in speaking, going from single words to complete sentence like "I feel tired when I wake up early."
The feeling checks in turned out to be the most successful routine of the whole project. It was simple, it was personal, and the students genuinely responded to it. So it shows that when students are given a chance to express something real about themselves, even in a very basic way, they are much more willing to participate.
Well, now moving on to the main challenges and decisions we had. Well, the main challenges we faced were related to time, not to the students' motivation. Several school events like El Día del Niño and El Día del Idioma took up the class time that we planned to use. So because of that, we had to shorten the project from 7 weeks to 5 weeks. And we had to cancel the final exhibition we had originally planned. And with younger groups, the production stage also sometimes ran longer than expected. Some students had to finish their flashcards at home because they took a lot of time coloring.
And despite those changes, the final product came together well. At the end of the implementation, each classroom had a set of student-made flashcards mounted on the wall, covering, of course, all 5 vocabulary topics already mentioned, and those cards stayed in the classroom after we left. So the regular teacher could keep using them. One of the teachers, the fourth grade teacher, who is not an English specialist, told us she was interested in doing something similar in her own classes.
Well, now, looking back, we can say that the project worked. Students learn vocabulary, they use it in meaningful ways, and they stayed engaged through the 5 weeks. So we also proved that you don't need a lot of technology or expensive materials to create a good learning experience. A piece of paper and some color pencils can be enough as long as the activities are purposeful and connected to something students care about.
Yeah. For me, the biggest lesson was the importance of observing the students carefully. Not all groups respond in the same way to the same activity. Comparing with my partners, I noticed that in fourth grade we worked beautifully, and we didn't need as much adjustments as the second grade. So that kind of flexibility can be good to adapt and is something that you can only learn being in the classroom.
Well, and for me, the most meaningful part was seeing how students' confidence grew week by week. At the beginning, many of them were hesitant to say anything in English. And they were initiating conversations, answering without being asked, and showing their cards to each other proudly. So those small moments were the real results of the project.
Well, to finish, we want to invite you to visit our network portfolio, where you can find all the documentation from the project, lesson plans, photos from the sessions, samples of the students' work, and the templates that we have used. As you can see, we have shown some of the evidences, but on the network portfolio, there's a lot more of, a much more information.
Yeah, let me share with you the network portfolio. As you can see here, we have in the first screen, well, the title, the short title of our project, My Colorful World. And also we have the PBL, the complete project is already ready to be downloaded. We also have all the plannings, as you can see, each one of us has different 5 plannings. And well, as you can see, from Julián, Danilo, and Jhonn, each one of us has the plannings. And finally, here we can find the evidences. Well, here we can see teacher Danilo and a lot of evidences from different topics, uh, students working on that. It's Danilo again. More and more evidences. And this is me.
Yes. To ramp up, A Colorful World was a project that connected what we learn in theory with what actually happens in a real classroom. So in that way, it helped students grow in their use of English, and it helped us, of course, grow as future teachers.
Thank you very much for listening.